then I think there's two parts to boundaries. One is establishing them, and a lot of times they do come out as the great Esther Hicks says, it's sifting and sorting through your experiences, and you sometimes have to know what you do want from learning what you didn't want. And when you have these experiences over and over again, and you don't discern between the two, and you keep being okay with it, again, toleration tendency, then you're going to have chaos on the far side of simplicity in your life. But step one is then deciding, okay, this no longer works for me. What would you then, step two really would be, what do you want to be the positive variation of that? Not, I no longer want, it's like ordering a pizza and you walk into a pizza place and like, what do you want? You're like, well, I don't want mushrooms and I don't want olives on it. Like, okay, but what do you want? Just told you, I don't want mushrooms and I don't want olives. A lot of us are ordering life that way. I don't want to be overwhelmed. I don't want my business to be crazy. I don't want, right? We talk a lot more and focus a lot more on what we don't want. And you see this a lot of times when you're consulting, right? Yep. It's, okay, so tell me what your goals are. Well, I don't want to be having hiring issues. Okay, what's the opposite end of that? Well, when I hire the right person, I won't be hiring the wrong person. Like, they can't even like neurologically see it from the only the positive variation or variable of that. So I think one is like knowing what doesn't work, sorting through what would be the goal only in the positive verbiage. But then I think the biggest part of this, which I guess I would call step 3, is pronouncing it and proclaiming it to the world.
Okay, everyone, get ready for my show today. This is going to be on mental health, but the way Jason Wasser, my good friend, I've had him on the show before, the way Jason takes on this conversation, it's almost like you're in therapy. He's going to give some really good practical things that we can all take away as we're thinking about our belief system and pressure and stress and guilt that we put on ourselves and how that's playing out in the pandemic. So I think you're going to find it to be amazing. So for those of you that haven't heard Jason on my show before, Jason is the host of the You Winning Life podcast. He's a licensed therapist. He's the founder and director of the Family Room Wellness Associates. So he does individual work with as he puts it, he does mind-body wellness practice for elite individuals. So a lot of entrepreneurs, working professionals, and really combines kind of coaching and therapy. He's an absolute gift. Jason and I love our conversations, and I think you're going to really, really enjoy the one that we're about to have. So listen real close, and at the end, as I always do, I'm going to highlight all of my takeaways.
The Workplace Therapist Show is sponsored by the Leadership Foundry. Bringing a cutting-edge, real-world approach to leadership development, the Leadership Foundry partners with each client organization to create a custom-tailored experience, virtual or in person, that combines innovative leadership content, world-class facilitators, and one-on-one coaching to ensure your leaders have everything they need to grow and thrive. To find out more and to design your one-of-a-kind program, visit myleadershipfoundry.com.
Jason, it is so good to see you again, my friend. I mean, I'm really excited about our conversation today. I'm excited about the topic because it's so relevant and timely, talking about mental health and when to take a mental health day and how do we care for ourselves. We think about Simone Biles, Naomi Osaka, taking those mental health breaks and stepping back. And so I want to talk about your perspective on that. But before we do that, it's been a little while since we talked. I'd love to catch up. What have you been up to in the last
first of all,
6 to 12 months?
Thank you for having me here. Right, it's been a couple of months, and I know we're in touch offline here and there. It's been wild, right? Since we last talked, I think vaccines rolled out, and the world was changing, and then it's pulling back, and it's right. People are dancing and sticking their toe in the world, and then coming back. So it's been a really interesting, from my perspective as a therapist, to see how people's mindset is changing. Right, we had the time frame where people were saying, "I'm just over it," and they're just going to go live their life, and then there are people who are much more cautious or looking at things from a different perspective. And I see that both as a therapist working with my clients and seeing anybody I see in person only outdoors, and also seeing it with the people that I'm working with that are still navigating. Schools are opening this week here in South Florida, and already hearing all the craziness that's going on. One district in Palm Beach already has 180 kids that are quarantining within day 2 of opening. Wow. So it's been an interesting, just the mindset of navigating version 2 of, I think I would call it version 2 of this pandemic, because it's now, right, once the vaccines kicked in and what's going on with that. But as far as the things that are happening, my podcast hit episode 100 that you were a guest on.
Congratulations.
few weeks ago. I started a second podcast with a professional matchmaker on relationships and dating and all of
Nice.
the nitty gritty raw stuff. That's called Have We Got a Match for You? And yeah, I'm looking forward to doing more retreats and conferences, whether it's remote or in person, over the next year and a half.
So, okay, so I want to ask you a question. So since
Yeah.
you've been so close and connected, like I am to our clients in a more intimate way, have you seen any changes in terms of either the presenting issues or the general state of their affect and mood?
Yeah, so I think that there is that I don't want to call it subclinical because I don't want to necessarily put it as a diagnosis, but I think people are kind of in this fight or flight or freeze paradigm that they don't even realize that they're in, and it's showing up in a lot of different ways. And as we know that phrase, like, feelings buried alive never die, and it shows up whether it's emotional or physical. But I'm seeing it a lot in relationships. In fact, most therapists that I know here in South Florida, if they're a established therapist, they're booked. And I'm not sure if it's like that in Atlanta as well, but which is also one of the reasons why I've gotten licensed in the state of Georgia over the last couple of months, besides my love for Atlanta, is that people are booked. And people are now thankfully coming out of the woodwork to find a therapist. And whether it took a pandemic, whether it took being stuck at home with someone that you tolerated, whether it's a child or your spouse or a partner or whatever, or they've been locked up with a business partner or people on their staff, one of the things I'm realizing is this term that I love is toleration tendencies, and that people are finally maybe getting to a point where they're not willing to tolerate things that work or don't work for them.
Yeah.
And finally addressing it, and we're seeing it in culture at large.
It's funny. I wonder and I'd love to get your thoughts on this, kind of what that breaking point for us is. Like, how many months can we go before we say, I got to make a shift? So I had a call with a client recently, and this is a coaching client, and she runs a nonprofit. And the last couple conversations had been more about therapy. And in fact, this most recent call was a very positive call. She said, oh my gosh, I'm really happy to report that both my husband and I are now in marriage counseling. We're both in individual therapy, and both of my 2 kids are now in therapy too. And we're a family of people that really don't like to ask for help.
Right.
But at some point that got to a breaking point, and they realized that they needed help in other ways if they were going to move together in a healthy way. And she was very excited about it. She's like, yeah, now we're
I think that
investing in
mindset's
therapy.
shifting, right? And that's what it is. It is an investment, right? And I share that with people all the time. And that's one of my like catalyzing statements. My rally cry is that I'm not just here to help you minimize your stress. I'm here to help you maximize your potential. And I think that when you look at
That's
therapy,
really good, Jason. That's really good.
it took me a while to craft that, and that's what thank God for the world of entrepreneurship and my business coach, right? The catalyzing statement, right? It's kind of, and everybody in a way should have their own catalyzing statement. It's like, what are you here to do? What's the bigger picture thing? But like, how do you get your stakeholders involved in your life? Whether it's your relationship, whether it's your parenting, whether it's your PTA president of your kid's school, right? What's the rallying cry that you're bringing all your troops together for a single outcome that everybody is buying or bought into? But the idea that this, definitely, listen, it was crazy. We see our mortality in this pandemic, and we all know someone at this point who has gotten sick. We all possibly know someone who knows someone or had a family member or a friend of someone who has passed away. We have people who have been in the hospital. We have people who've had, thankfully, very minor or asymptomatic. But mortality is on the front line. So I think when there is a crisis, we haven't seen, it's like watching like any of the old British TV shows or whatever, and it's like post World War I and post World War II, right? And like people were like much more in crisis, where things got solidified and cleaned up. So I know, like, talk about like World War II and people coming out of DP camps, right? If they lost their families and they lost their spouses, they got married and tried to start a family. Their world had to be recreated.
Yeah.
Right? And that came out of crisis. So now it doesn't necessarily always mean that those relationship dynamics were healthy, but it was the most important thing is to restart the world, to restart my world. And I think because of this pandemic, I think people are trying to figure out how to restart their world, perhaps even in a healthier, more efficient, and more simplistic way.
Yeah. And I think as you alluded to, what makes it so hard is we're in this like 2 steps forward, 1 step back. Are we restarting? Are we not restarting? How do we restart? Like, what does that look like? And over all this, we have this just pervasive anxiety. And
Yeah.
that fear is just feeding it. It's just throwing more and more kind of woods on the coals.
Sure.
I remember, when I did my TED Talk some years ago about contagiousness of emotions in the workplace, the body of research around that said not all emotions are equally contagious, and anxiety is the most contagious. So now you've got this big anxiety global cloud that is just hovering over everybody, creating different kinds of, probably even stimulating that fight, flight, or freeze response, which
For sure.
makes it even more complicated.
And I think we're kind of like, it's probably safe to easily assess someone for post-traumatic stress, except the problem is we're not post.
Oh, that's fair. Yeah.
So, right, for some people that have been like the mindset of like, I was done with this pandemic 30 days in, 60 days in, 90 days in, and I just acted as if, doesn't mean that just because you've chosen that on your rational neocortex brain, doesn't mean that your limbic system is not responding to it as a fight or flight safety paradigm, right? And in survival mode. And that could be how some people go into survival mode. That's denial. Right? That's just because, right? And people went out there and like lived their life as if nothing was going on, and I'm not going to change anything, and nothing's going to tell me that anything's different, right? That is a level of denial. I'm not saying they're right or I'm not saying they're wrong. I'm not here to determine that circumstance for someone. I always look at, is things allowing you to be healthier in all aspects of your life, or is it taking you away from being healthy? And what's the rules and the beliefs you carry around that? But I would not, no one's looked at this pandemic scenario tied in with the political craziness as a post-traumatic or I don't even know what the word, present traumatic stress disorder.
Yeah.
And we're seeing it show up again. Like I know our topic is, getting into what's going on in the macro society as a whole today.
Yeah.
But how do we handle it, and but I think that this is something that's going to be addressed. And we have people like, unfortunately, right, politicians that have decided what our mental health and our wellness health should be, instead of people that are actually experts,
Yeah.
So.
Agreed. Okay, let's go macro, and now we're going to go down.
Macro.
Well, now we're going to go down to micro. Okay. So, when and how to take a mental health day. And so I want to put this in the bucket of self-care, so we can absolutely expand beyond it. But I want to really explore this with you and get your perspective on mental health days and other forms of self-care that we can do when we're in the middle of this stress event, stress chapter, season, whatever you want to call it. As you said, we're not post-traumatic stress disorder. We're not post yet. So when you think about mental health and mental health days, what's the healthiest way for us to view those?
So I think the first thing is reverse engineering our lifestyle in general. And when we don't take into consideration all of the things we need to do for us to reach our potential, all the things that are required for us to be the most healthy, amazing version of ourselves, whether or not there's a pandemic, is irregardless of that scenario, right? It's we don't believe that we have the ability to decide for ourselves what's the most important things to do. And a lot of those are surrounded or embedded with heavy cultural, religious, gender biases and roles that are put upon us.
You're going to love this. My favorite word for 2021, and my wife knows this, I love the word agency. And that's kind of goes to what you said. Like, we don't believe we have a sense of agency. We have to kind of we just have to kind of stay on the treadmill and just do. Yeah. Because of all those cultural, religious, political, whatever those happen to be, beliefs. Yeah.
And when to unpackage those, and I've been doing that a lot, and I see that a lot, obviously, men have it at a certain level. But I think that women in general, because of the societal pressure of multiple roles of those who are maybe out in the professional world, but are also, have chosen to be in a relationship, have, those who have chosen to get married, those who have chosen to have children, that there's a massive inner struggle with my female clients as far as balancing those identities without feeling any level of guilt. And I see it, and I just had this conversation with a couple that the husband has no problem willingly saying, I'm going to the gym tonight, and I need this for my mental health based on military service, X, Y, and Z, right? And this is what I know actually works for me, and I need to do this a minimum of X, Y, and Z times a week. And then the wife will say, but I want to do that too. I work just as hard. And then, but I also have to make the meals, and I also have to make sure your food's ready when you come home, and I have to make sure blah, blah, blah. And there was just the hidden belief that I can't decide to put myself first because then I will be violating my role of a wife. I will be violating my role as a mother, and all of this is pre-programmed into us. And I distilled all of that with this couple, as far as why men and in certain cultures, like in the Latin culture, there we call it machismo, or in this culture, right? It's that there's things that there's more entitlements to because of,
Yeah.
and things that you can't do because of. And I think mental health parity, right, amongst everybody who's an adult that should have agency, needs to deconstruct what those beliefs are that are keeping them from that and reverse engineer the process. If I gave you all the money you needed to delegate out someone to cook your meals for you, to delegate out someone to do your laundry for you, to delegate out childcare, and you were able to spend the same amount of time with your kid, eye-to-eye contact, versus having to prep the meal and running and doing their laundry and telling them to go wash and brush their teeth before or whatever, but actual intimate connected time with your loved ones, and everything else that you can technically pay someone to do was referred out, would you still be spending the same amount of time with that person, and would you be able to be more focused and present? And it's a little bit of an emotional struggle for them to see that. And I think that's where us as entrepreneurs kind of like can leverage our perspective of, but we're experts at X, Y, and Z. Why don't you pay someone else who's an expert at doing that to do that for us? But that guilt is racked in our mentality from that. And I think that's where this mental health, self-care, mental health holiday, mental health hour, mental health 15 minutes, where people are like so excited just to go to the bathroom alone, especially like new mothers, right?
Yeah,
oh my God,
right.
I went to the bathroom alone. This was a miracle. That's mental health.
And usually the little kiddo follows to the bathroom and slides
Or a
their
pet.
hand underneath the door. You know?
Right. Or a pet.
Yeah,
it might
or
be
a
a
pet
pet.
does
I can't
too.
even go to the bathroom without my dog staring at me, right? Well, lock your door. Well, no, it'll scratch, and I don't want it to. I feel bad for it. I think that's like, if everybody's listening to this, write the list out of if you were to do these things that we're talking about, that high level self-care, what would you feel bad that you're not doing, or who you're not doing for during that same time? And if you can clear that out and bring it to your therapist or bring it to us, right, we'll be happy to help you, parse that through. But I think that's like that first level of defense is, what are you feeling guilty that you're not doing in that moment, or you feel that you're being selfish in that moment?
I had a client this a couple weeks ago, and I was speaking with her, and she works full time. Her husband stays home full time. They've got 2 young kids, and she's working long hours. And she was going to go on vacation with a friend of hers for a weekend. Husband really wanted her to go. She said, "I can't leave him alone with the kids for the weekend," because she had this sense that she had to be there, right? But logically, we say, well, he's there with the kids 24/7. This is the role that he's chosen. But and as we moved from a coaching conversation to a therapy conversation, and it became all about ownership, and she was owning everything, and she couldn't let go of anything. Right. And it was really creating so much stress and anxiety. And once she kind of made that mental shift, she texted me the next day and said, "Thanks for shifting our conversation from coaching to therapy. I really needed that different perspective." But it was funny because she was still holding on to maybe some of those traditional views that she had to be there with the kids on the weekend, even though that's what her husband has been doing 24/7. So interesting.
And I see that so often, especially when a spouse maybe who has been a primary caretaker of the kids for a certain amount of years, and then they go back out to the workforce, and maybe the partner is, and we'll just use in this example just to make it more binary, like if the wife has been home and the husband's been working, and even though the husband may have a good level of engagement and is involved, and right, we're going to assume that it's a high level frequency couple, that even if it switches, and I've seen this with some of my couples, and the husband even takes on more and loves taking on more and wants it and is able to take on more, that the wife or the mom still feels tremendously guilty for that.
Yeah, really, it's interesting. So I think you're so spot on about kind of what's your belief system about the things that you're supposed to do, the shoulds and supposed tos that you're going to feel guilty about if you don't do those. So I want to take this conversation slightly different direction. I know I've definitely had this experience in the last year, if not the last couple weeks, not the last couple days, where, I think I'm fine, and then all of a sudden hit a breaking point and I'm not fine, and I'm just, wake up maybe with just generalized anxiety, not tied to anything in specific, but my wife knows Monday mornings tend to be more anxiety producing days for me. I'll wake up and I'm just like, I'm anxious and I have no idea why. I can't point to anything, but it's there. What are some cues for us that we need to take care of ourselves or take a step back or, do something different to just reset so we don't just try and push through?
Well, first, let's start with identifying what that feeling is or what that experience is for people. And it's going to show up in multiple different ways, right? Very much understandable that you have a case on the Mondays. That's just, I think that's culturally embedded, even though you and I are so passionate and love what we're doing and love who we're working with and you get to work with your, right? You work with your wife and you have other people that you're very close to that are part of your team. So even though all of those are positives, it's still, right, there's still something that's going on that maybe we feel like we're not doing enough. Again, right, this is all that unprocessed stuff. Like, I could be doing more. I haven't hit that level yet. There's always that self-judgment, that self-criticalness that I think is our first line to look at. Where do we feel we're disappointing ourselves? Where do we feel like we're disappointing our family? Where do we feel like we're disappointing our clients, X, Y, and Z, why we're not doing enough? And I see this, and I know because I have a group of women that I'm seeing that have just somehow, polarity-wise, I've attracted a bunch of women who have just left recently or in the process of leaving narcissistic relationships with their partners.
Interesting.
And I desperately would love to create a group for just them. A therapeutic group for them. And I'm like, I just don't have the time for it. But I know they will all benefit. And I know that it could be also financially lucrative for me to do it. So there's no loss there. But I'm like, I just haven't sat down. And every time I see one of these people and I have a list of their names on a Post-it next to me, and I'm like, I just have to do it. I just have it. Right. So there's always this, like, it's finding the time, it's finding the energy. But think about it. I've prioritized it as far as me serving somebody else and helping someone else versus what's best for me. And a lot of us, especially in our helping professions, still use our worth based on what we can do for others. So if we're lying on the couch, if it's Sunday night and you're listening to some jazz on the couch and nothing's going on, you're like, what do I have to do? What do I have to do? Versus this is what I have to do. Yeah.
It's funny. And this is probably where I need you to help me as a therapist. You being the therapist, me being the client. Okay, we're about to be clear. So I've always wrestled with this, and my wife's always said, "Well, gosh, you need to take some time off. You really need to take some time off. You need to take a couple weeks off." I'm like, "Yes, but I'm self-employed, so if I take a couple weeks off, it's not like I get paid for those 2 weeks. I lose those 2 weeks, and then I'm paying to go do something for those 2 weeks. So it's like a double whammy. It like puts me behind 2 weeks, puts me behind 4 weeks." And, and then I can't do that. So,
because there's the cost of not doing business.
Yeah, there's the cost of not doing it. So, when the kids were little and while I was kind of building my practice, what we do is long weekends. It was easier for me to get away, like, take a Friday and a Monday off and just do that once a quarter. I could kind of get away with that without it being too disruptive. But I realized I could use 2 weeks in a row. I could really use that. But it's figuring out how to give myself permission to do that and make that work. Which is hard.
Well, I think if you the easiest way to get any of us out of it is by making agreements with people that we're partnering with that this is a non-negotiable from the get-go. So it's now the beginning of August that we're having this conversation. And since June, I've been already telling any clients that I've been seeing and any clients that I'm onboarding, that's a new client, I want to give you a heads up from the first week of September until the end of the first week in October, it's going to be a crap show with my schedule. I want to apologize. It's not my fault. It's the God of the Old Testament's fault. All of the Jewish holidays this year, according to the Hebrew calendar, are all pretty much falling out on a Monday night to Wednesday night schedule. And since I do that not only for my spiritual well-being, but it's also for my emotional well-being, those are the days. So you may only see me once the entire month. But since you know that I don't take crisis clients on, since you know that I don't take high need clients on, and you're not a high need crisis client, are you okay with that? Because if you're not, then I need to refer you out right off the bat.
Right.
To somebody else. And I haven't had one client yet that says, "Oh, that's going to be an issue for me."
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
Right. And I say, so I have all the entire September. Here's the dates in September. Oh, and by the way, the first week of October, I'm going away to a neuro-emotional technique conference in Sedona. Half of that week, I'm going to be hiking. Half that week, I'm going to be in the Grand Canyon. Half the week, I'm going to be in a conference. Like, oh my God, that's so amazing. I'm so jealous. No one has said, how dare you?
Right. Right.
So it's that preemptive.
And if
right?
they did say, how dare you, then that's clearly not a good client.
Right. That's a swipe left
yeah, that's exactly right. That's clearly somebody who's got maybe some unhealthy expectations. Well, you're hitting on something that I think is really important that people who are listening get. There's probably some core principles in therapy. I don't know, there's probably 5. We boiled it all down. But one of them is definitely boundaries, by far. One of them, as therapists, we're always trying to help people establish healthy boundaries with themselves and with others. And what you just hit on right there really is about that. It's about creating those healthy boundaries, which is so important for self-care.
Sure. Well, and then I think there's 2 parts to boundaries. One is establishing them, and a lot of times they do come out as the great Esther Hicks says, it's sifting and sorting through your experiences. And you sometimes have to know what you do want from learning what you didn't want. And when you have these experiences over and over again, and you don't discern between the two, and you keep being okay with it, again, toleration tendency, then you're going to have chaos on the far side of simplicity in your life. But step 1 is then deciding, okay, this no longer works for me. What would you then, step 2 really would be, what do you want to be the positive variation of that? Not, I no longer want, it's like ordering a pizza and you walk into a pizza place and like, what do you want? You're like, well, I don't want mushrooms and I don't want olives on it. Like, okay, but what do you want? Just told you, I don't want mushrooms and I don't want olives. But a lot of us are ordering life that way. I don't want to be overwhelmed. I don't want my business to be crazy. I don't want, right? We talk a lot more and focus a lot more on what we don't want. And you see this a lot of times when you're consulting, right? Yep. It's okay. So tell me what your goals are. Well, I don't want to be having hiring issues. Okay. What's the opposite end of that? Well, when I hire the right person, I won't be hiring the wrong person. Like they can't even like neurologically see it from the only the positive variation or variable of that. So I think one is like knowing what doesn't work, sorting through what would be the goal only in the positive verbiage. But then I think the biggest part of this, which I guess I would call step 3, is pronouncing it and proclaiming it to the world.
Yeah.
Letting everybody know in advance so that it's not a shock, it's not a surprise, it's not a secret. And you can say, well, but this is my core value of my business. This is my boundary of my business. This is the expectation of I've already let you know this. And I remember, right, especially in communication and conflict, when there's a disagreement in businesses, we've already discussed this at our last meeting. As I shared with you in that meeting, if this topic comes up, we're going to have to take it to a mediator. We're going to have to take it to a therapist. We're going to have to take it to the workplace therapist. Yeah. To discuss this, you've now brought this up twice. I'm not going to discuss this any further. I'm now setting up an appointment for both of us with so-and-so.
I think you're making a really good point, too, that there's a step 4, which is you have to be prepared to defend it. Yeah. It's like as you were talking, I was immediately thinking like it's like we're like a little village. And when you set a boundary, you're putting a wall around your village. And that almost invites invaders. Like, what do they have over there that's so good? Like, I want to get over that wall. And you're going to have some people that don't respect your boundary, or they're going to challenge it. And sometimes it's well-intentioned. Like my executive assistant might say, gosh, Brandon, I see you blocked off Fridays. Can I use that Friday? I really could use, that would benefit you and me as I'm trying to schedule for you. Right. And then I have to make a decision. Do I give that up or not? But being willing to defend it is important.
Right. And we can use another word for that, which is accountability. How are you holding yourself and who else is holding you to that? So I think that's when we were talking about like stakeholders and even having clients become a stakeholder in your success. In other words, why wouldn't my clients want me to go to this conference in Sedona to learn, to go deeper with my own any neuroemotional technique practice, which I'm going to then take back and then benefit them. And if they don't want me to do that, then we're clearly not aligned people to be working together as partners, because even a client is a partner at some level. Yeah. And we are wanting agreements with all of these people in the life, right? It's cooperative components lining up, but we want people who are like-minded, like-valued, shared meanings and dreams to be part of that team, especially in a relationship or a family, right? The shared meanings and dreams, but even clients, right? We're partners in this process.
Yeah. Yeah, agreed completely. So, we bounced around this one specific topic that I do want to come back to, make sure we close the loop on it. So, mental health days, taking mental health days. When any thoughts on when to do that and when not to do that? I'd be really curious to your perspective on that.
Yeah. So from the entrepreneur mindset, I've adopted the quarterly and annual meetings. And you can also adopt that to your relationship. For those who are in a romantic relationship, whether it's with your family, whether it's with your children, whether it's with your spouse, whether it's with the partner, whatever, right, is having those quarterly and annual blocked out times. Like you said, whether it's a Friday afternoon to a Sunday night, right, as if that's doable, but it's looking at the calendar and reverse engineering. So let's use it as an example for families. We now know that it's in August in everybody's school calendar. If you have a child in school, you already know the annual calendar for the school. Whether they're going to be in school or whether they're going to be home remains to be determined by where you are and where you live and all that other stuff. And, God willing, things will hopefully continue to get a little bit better over the next number of months. But let's just say short of that, that general calendar. And then you have if you have any spiritual religious observances for holidays, if you have any family obligations that you have to attend, any weddings, any celebratory stuff that's already in your calendar. And then when you look at that, by the end of the day, you realize that you only have maybe 15 or 20 options for weekends.
Yeah.
So that means every night, no more than 90 days, pick a time frame in one of those weekends where it's a getaway/retreat mindset for you and your loved one, for you, your loved one and your children, whatever variable it is. But it's taking that annual and quarterly meeting mindset and applying that to your relationship, applying it to your family, and also applying it for yourself. If you have to doing that on a Friday, is that you're literally doing a staycation.
I love that. I love that. I've once heard someone describe life today, particularly the way our work life works, that you have to treat it almost like interval training. It's high intensity, but you need a break. High intensity, you need a break. Otherwise, it's just high intensity.
Right.
And
but if we don't map that out intentionally, again, reverse engineering that process, then life, what was that, Parker Lewis, right? Life will just, whatever the awesome line was. But life will just run us by.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, now my birthday was July 4th. I was hiking in the mountains in Tennessee, and then now it's August, whatever it is, and I'm like, where the heck did the last 6 weeks go? I have no clue where the last 6 weeks went. No clue.
Yeah.
And now I know in September I have these days off, but that's, forced upon me by my level of observance to those holidays, but it's forced upon me. Not everybody has a forced upon, choice. Some people have to force themselves to make that choice.
So for you, as you think about September, what feelings do you have about that for you? Are you excited about it? Is it like a break? Is it feeling more like pressure? I got to get all this stuff done before then. I mean, what do you have around that?
So I think that the cleaner and tighter I've gotten with proclaiming it to my clients, and the higher level client that I've been taking on, the simpler it's become. I think as my practice has evolved, as my financial stability has grown, it's leaving me with very minimal anxiety. The one thing that's interesting that I'll add to that is I've decided to leave my last insurance panel, and I planned it for September 1st, since I'm not going to be seeing a lot of those clients consistently anyway, and I came up with an agreement with them to make it financially so the bare minimum will leave if they want to leave, or they'll come once a month, and any new client I get automatically will be at a higher rate than what I'd be offering these older clients. But I knew that if that was the month that I'm not going to be seeing that many clients anyway, I might as well go all in on that. Now, I know my practice is not going to shut down. I know that I have enough to cover that. I know it's not going to make a major dip. I know what my expenses are and so forth. But I think that because I've changed my belief system around it, is there some level of I want to be clear with what people are telling themselves. There's a difference between being worried and having anxiety. And there's a difference between being nervous or concerned and having full-blown clinical anxiety.
Yeah, say more about that.
Right? And a lot of people, especially when you're coming into a therapist, that the clinical diagnosis, in order to meet criteria, it has to be happening for a very significant period of time with very specific symptoms. And a lot of people say, well, I'm stressed out, I have anxiety. No. Two very different things. And we use a lot of words that we upscale to become more intense. And I think as we're talking about our mental health, our well-being, it's a very scary, it's anxiety provoking.
Right.
This conversation. And I'm sure a lot of people who are listening to this are like, I don't know if I could do what Jason did. And like, just a quick background, like, I'm a scholarship kid who graduated high school with a 1-point GPA, who's been on my own since I was 18 years old. And I remember I was 20, 21 years old, and it was, I buy the gallon Tropicana orange juice with pulp and cans of tuna fish and cans of tomato sauce, because I had $10, $15, $20 a week for my food. When I was so I'm not coming from a place where I was bankrolled. I've been on my own, and I've done this, and I've worked 2 or 3 jobs in order to get to the place where I've come. So this is all doable when mapped out, but with the reverse engineering, and why working with someone like you and I is so important to help people get there.
Yeah. So one last thing, and then we'll start to wrap up. You mentioned something there at the end about some decisions you're making, like or leaving that insurance panel, some other things.
Mm-hmm.
What you're really talking about there is, so on the one hand, we set our boundaries, we create space that's healthy for us. The other way, from a practical business way of making that work, is increase your hourly rate. Right? Increase your hourly rate,
absolutely.
so it gives you more flexibility in space, and that's what you're doing. And for some people, they can literally do it, like you or I, and then other people may have to think about how they get a different job, or get a job that's going to either provide them more time or more pay, and use that to kind of create that buffer in space.
Yeah, and I see that all the time with people who, let's call them entrepreneurs, right? They might, and I would only say that the entrepreneur is only to the level that you have influence on the company's growth and decision making. That if you actually, like that term stakeholder, like that they know that you're invested, you're just not perceived as hired help, and you're interchangeable with anybody else. And if you're in a company and you want to have more influence, and it's asking, right? What can I do to contribute more? What can I do to bring more? I have this idea, and I see this all the time. And I have some clients that are working in, large food service conglomerates that are, and moving their way up the chain. And I'm like, well, how much relative influence do you feel like you have? I'm like, oh no, I feel like I'm heard by the management team and blah, 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 blah. I'm like, great, that's amazing. And then I have people who've been working with the same corporation since they were 14 years old. And I'm like, how much money do you really need to be making to really no longer be worried about money within this company? And they said, I need to make another $35,000 a year. Can you go to your HR person and say, what's the time frame? Or is it even doable for me to make that much money in this company after being in this company for so long? Is that even doable? And if they say no, then you have to decide immediately to get out of that company, even though you have brand allegiance because you've been there for so long and you're comfortable for being there so long. So yes, that conversation, which I think is a whole other episode that you and I should definitely talk about, right, is how to decide whether you're in the right vertical, and whether you're in the right business, whether you're in the right company, whether you're with the right partners with the business, and all those different things. But I think, right, just going back to the simplicity of deciding mental health, right, we saw it right with what happened in the Olympics recently, which is, I know, one of the things you wanted to talk about, of like, I mean, God bless, like these two, right, Osaka and Biles, to make these proclamations that, and not only was it not men, it was women, and it was women of color. So what a bold, brave, insanely awesome thing for them, and being young, being in their early 20s.
Yeah,
we're fine. Like, it's a game changer that is happening, and it's absurd to see the blowback that they're getting from people who are just crap talking them. But the fact that if guys, I'm going to be really blunt, and I apologize, and I'm happy to have this conversation with you one-on-one if you all want to DM me and have a phone call conversation about this. If you're sitting there and you're commenting on other people's posts and writing full paragraphs, commenting on social media about something, you have way too much free time, and you are not aligned with your purpose.
That's amen, brother. I got nothing to add to that, other than I think you're spot on. Jason, this was great. I mean, there's so much more we could have talked about. We didn't even talk about the difference between coaching and therapy today, and the hybrid around that. That's another conversation. But I want to respect your time, and so I ask every single one of my guests, and I've asked you this question before, but I've done a slight tweak to it this year.
Yes.
What is one life hack for us to help us have either better relationships or healthier conversations, either at work or at home?
So I'll continue to tie into what we said before, is going to the dollar store and getting that old composition book for 99 cents, one of these bad boys.
Yep.
Right. It literally, I think it still has a dollar sticker on it. The mead composition books, remember those? Right? It's $1. And just get 10 of them. Just get 10 of them. And on the cover of each one, just write a different theme or topic or part of your life. And just, headline it. And in your personal one, if you want to do it on Google Drive, do it on Google Drive and make a folder and whatever. But sometimes it's just easier to write it out. And then if you want to transfer it. But right, it's whatever your beliefs are about a specific category. What are the obligations that you think you have? And this is all going back to, according to my culture, what am I obligated to do? The teachings of, right? What, according to my religion, according to my gender, according to my skin tone, skin color, right? All of those different complexities. And I'm not going to get into the politics side of it, right? Because there's a level where it's not political. It's just understanding bias in general, right? Yeah. But according to everybody has this. Everybody has a family of origin. You are all born to a family. Now, there are people out there who don't know their family of origin. They've been adopted. But then there's the belief system that comes along with, because I was adopted, or because my family of origin didn't want me, or I know a little bit about my family of origin, I have to try to honor them, even though, right, I know my family of origin was Italian, so I have to take on Italian, even though my adoptive family is whatever, right? So I need to find a way to connect to that, right? These are all personal rules that we create.
Yeah.
And some of them are limiting, and some of them are expansive. In other words, some of those things will help us feel really amazing, and some of those things will help us feel like crap and keep us stuck. And combine that to, what do you want your life to look like?
Yeah.
What do you want that reverse engineer? What are you afraid to ask for? And what are these rules and roles that you've been predetermined based on gender, based on where you were born, based on your family of origin, based on religion and creed and whatever, that's not allowing you to get there just based on whose rules, whose roles? How did you choose to adopt them? Why are you choosing? Who are you honoring? Who are you dishonoring by doing that? Who are you dishonoring by doing something different? Who are you honoring by doing something different? Yeah. And where do you come in with your own, the word I'm gonna honor you is age, right? With your own agency.
Yeah, absolutely beautiful. Jason, this is awesome. So before I let you go, if people want to follow you, learn more about what you're up to, listen to any of your podcasts, where can they go?
Sure. So podcast, You Winning Life, all over, anywhere, easily be found. Same on Instagram, You Winning Life. My private practice is the Family Room Wellness Associates. Happy to answer any questions and give resources. Just happy to hear from people. And, we have a great team of people that we love referring out to when we're not the right fit. And I'm very committed to helping people wherever they are find the right person that they need to see. Yeah. But those are the first places to go.
Yeah, that's great. Jason, your gift, my friend. Granted. I can't wait till our next show.
Looking forward.
So wasn't that a good conversation? As always, I've got pages of notes. I want to highlight a couple things that I really took away from Jason. So he talked first, right out of the gate, he talked about, when we deal with pressures and stresses in life right now, we really have three different ways. We have fight, flight, and freeze. And I think we've got people in our lives right now that we could probably point to and say, the pandemic has caused them to fight, flight, or freeze. It talks about not trying to kind of minimize stress, but really try to maximize potential. And then as you're thinking about yourself, he really said you really want to examine those beliefs, that those things that you feel like are holding you back, those things that are making you feel guilty, that identity, those things you don't want to let go of. Maybe you're feeling like you've got to take care of the kids and make dinner at home and make all the money and mow the lawn, and you've got all these things. And what are those? Where do those come from for you? And how can you start to kind of get rid of some of those? And so the healthy thing to do with those, I wrote down delegate, outsource, and say no. So what are some of those things that we can get other folks to do for us so we don't have to do that, to give us a little more space? And then he talked about boundaries. He talked about how do you set the boundaries to protect yourself? And he used this great analogy about going and ordering pizza. He said, so many people, we go into the pizza place and they say, well, what do you want? We say, well, we want a pizza, but we don't want olives and mushrooms. They say, well, okay, got it, but what do you want? Well, no mushrooms and olives. What do you really want? He said, kind of claim that, really be able to kind of stake that, say that out loud, and back that up. And that's all that process of kind of setting healthy boundaries. And that was a good segue into the very last point that I would want to highlight for all of us. I pushed him hard on mental health and mental health days, and he had a really great idea around that. He said proactively schedule those. Just like if you ran a business and you'd have quarterly meetings or annual meetings, put those on the calendar. Maybe it's a getaway with your significant other, or just a getaway for yourself, or something with your family. But put them on the calendar, schedule them, so you have breaks and you have that rest, so you don't get to the breaking point where you have to kind of call in and say, I just can't do it today. Now, there's always times we might have to do that, but if we can schedule them, it's going to be that much better. And his final takeaway, the life hack he had, was get those composition books and write down all of your beliefs that have come from your family of origin, and look at those honestly and see which ones you want to keep and which ones you want to challenge. So some great takeaways for us. I'm definitely going to really spend some time thinking about those this week and this weekend. I hope you do too, and I look forward to our next show.